Squarespace and click on mail, and that's all the information's there. So also because there's a number of the recordings are there, there's links to the invitations to the groups, all that kind of stuff is there. So Melda, I think we can start. I will turn it over
just
to you.
1 second. Steve, you know that Andrew was our other speaker though, right?
Yes, I know that he was the other speaker. He needs to rejoin, so if you can get in contact with him really quickly. Sorry about that. It's just
sorry,
it's a security issue.
Greg, can you stall, please?
Sorry?
Can you stall for a minute while I do that? Yes.
Okay, while we're waiting for Imelda, Maria, it's Kathy from KPU. We went through the exchange, the emails getting moved over a couple of months ago. We're still finding issues, but keep an eye on your search in your emails because it totally messed up. We couldn't search current mailboxes anymore. So just keep an eye on that because it's been a long battle for us.
Good to know, Kathy. Thank you. I'm still friends with all my colleagues in IT, and the one best piece of message I got, and they were converted pretty early on last fall, is to expect the unexpected. So things you had assumed work don't.
That's
I do not
interesting.
envy anybody doing that transition.
Go ahead, Melda.
Okay, sorry about that. So let's start. Now, sorry about that technical difficulty, but that's a good note to start on, is expect the unexpected. So if everyone has had a chance to answer the poll, I'm just going to leave it open for 1 more minute, and then as I introduce our speakers. So thank you everyone for joining us this morning. Welcome back to our 2021 virtual conference. This is our 3rd day of the 2nd week. And if you don't already know me, my name is Imelda May, and I'm the bookstore manager at Capilano University in North Vancouver, and I'll be your moderator for today. I'm very excited to bring you a panel of diverse faculty from across Canada. With us today, we have Jennifer Knapp from Langara College in Vancouver. We have Andrew Newton from Fraser International College, which is affiliated with SFU in Burnaby, BC. Peter Doherty from St. Mary's University in Calgary, Alberta, and Rachel Hayden at Western University in London, Ontario. So I'll get the speakers to introduce themselves with what discipline they teach and just a couple other notes about them. But I wanted to give them an idea of who the audience was. So mostly it looks like we have course materials and bookstore management, but a few people from campus administration, I'm not sure if they've added that to the chat, customer service, and of course, general merchandise. So that's good to know, the areas that will be the bookstore areas that are attending, hearing the speakers, that we have had this very highly requested panel to be pulled together. So I do have some set questions, but first I'll go through the introductions. So Jennifer, would you like to start with the discipline that you teach and whether your campus is opened or closed to students? And then my bonus question is, what is the last book you read for fun?
Thanks, Imelda. Yes, so I am currently the chair of interdisciplinary studies at Langara College. I run the classical studies program, and so I teach classes on ancient Greek and Roman history and culture, as well as teaching Latin and the Greek and Latin roots of English. And then the other question was,
whether your campus is open or closed to students.
So we are open to students, but only in a very limited capacity, only for classes that can only that require in-person instruction, so like labs and fine arts. But my discipline is we're completely off. So anybody who can is teaching online and been required to do so. And then you had your bonus question. I have to admit, I'm not reading for fun much these days. But
the other is like, or what is your favorite genre? But
yeah. So if I have an opportunity, I often read some sort of historical mystery, but not in my own period because it's too obvious, the errors. So I tend to read something a little bit later in what I call the modern period, which would be any time after about 300 CE. So.
Great, thank you. Let's see who I can see. Andrew, would you like to go next? If you need me to repeat the questions, I can.
That's okay. Hello. I've got the questions up on my screen. I'm trying to split my screen here to prompt myself. I'll start off with my name. I'm Andrew Newton. I think I remember that one. I'm the acting associate director this year at Fraser International College. Ordinarily, and I'm soon to go back to the classroom. I teach, I've taught a variety of subjects. My background is in TESOL, and I've taught several of our Stage 1 programs at FIC. Stage 1 is pre-university courses, students who are taking a grade 12 equivalency. So I teach a few of those courses, something called University Life, a preparatory course for the students, and World Issues Studies. And I should say at FIC, if you're not familiar with it, the Stage 1 or the first year is the pre-university, and then the Stage 2 is the equivalency of SFU's Year 1 courses. When they complete our program, then, and when they've got the GPA at the required level, then they can go into the second year at SFU. Is my campus open? My campus is, I own the campus. The campus is not open, definitely not. Fully closed to all of our students, and all of our students are international. We do have some who are on campus in the residence. So in that sense, the res, there are some there, and there are others in Vancouver. Majority are overseas. So it's quite a mix. And all our courses are currently online. What have I read most recently for fun? I guess I'd have to say the book Thunderstruck, which is a pretty interesting historical fiction based on Marconi's invention of the wireless and based on a, oh, what's the doctor's name? A pretty gruesome murder. It's a very, very entertaining and interesting historical fiction book.
Thank you, Andrew. Let's move to Alberta now. Peter, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Good morning. I'm Peter Doherty. I'm a professor at St. Mary's University. I try to teach psychology for the last 21 years, varying success. The campus is, like Jennifer describes, is like partially opened for some classes. Are running, particularly labs in particular. But the vast majority of them are online. So we don't have too many students. The administration building is closed to students. Library is very much strictly for pickup and that kind of things. I guess my bonus question is, I also don't have a lot of time for reading, but I'm really fascinated with biographies, and particularly as a psychologist, I've been reading quite a few biographies on Donald Trump, for entertainment purposes and also for learning and as well. So that's where I spend my time.
Wonderful, thank you. Rachel, you're next.
Hi, I'm Rachel Hayden. I'm in the Faculty of Education at Western University, and I coordinate our language and literacy courses in our Bachelor of Education, as well with Veronica Pastini-Ketchabau. I help coordinate the early childhood education courses. Those are my main foci, literacy and early childhood education. Our campus, I was just at our campus to pick up my new computer because my old one blew up. And I will admit that I got really teary when I walked to campus because it's the first time that I've been to campus in a very long time. And it was empty. It was just absolutely empty. Our classes, return to classes are delayed until February 21st. And even then it will be, you know, very, very few people who will actually be face-to-face. I'm currently teaching online. And I have a 13-year-old son who I read with him every day. We love sharing books together. So we just finished one of the Alex Rider novels. This is the first in the series. There are many of them. It was very fun, this Stormbreaker. And then for myself, I am rereading because it is also just she's just a beautiful writer, is the second in the trilogy by Eden Robinson, Trickster Drift. And the third is not out yet, but my mother sends me emails just about every day, making sure that I have pre-ordered the third for her because she just cannot wait for the third to come out.
Great. And if anyone's curious, the last book I read was with my 3-year-old nephew, which was the Peppa Pig Halloween book. So that was the last time I was able to see him. So a little bit sad. All right. Thank you so much for introducing yourselves. Let's get into the questions. So I'll start with Jennifer. What do you like most about teaching at your institution?
So Langara is a very open access institution. So we specialize in university transfer. So we teach, we do have a few undergraduate degrees. We have a very strong nursing program, but most of our teaching is with students who complete their first and second year of university level work, and then they transfer on to institutions like UBC or UVic, or perhaps even further across Canada. And so what I really like about Langara is that we really work a lot with students who are not traditional students. We try to make things more accessible to Aboriginal students, to first generation post-secondary students, mature or returning students. We get a lot of students who've worked for 10 years and then decided to come back. Students who failed out of university or didn't do well in high school and they want to come back and actually do well. And so, we really spend a lot of time trying to help students succeed and learn and grow and develop so that when they transfer, they are really ready to do as well, if not better than those who start at university. So we have things like smaller classes, more instructional hours, more office hours. The number of students that faculty have is limited so that we can give students more individual attention. And it's really great to see students succeed. So for example, some of my better students, one didn't finish high school and he decided to come back to school in his sort of late 20s. And after a few years with us, he was tutoring in the Writing Center. He got into the very challenging UBC Honors History program. Another student who I actually just spoke to, she just called me on the weekend, and she failed out of UBC, and when she started with us, she was getting C's, and she worked with me and something sort of clicked on one of our research projects, and she decided, gosh, this is really what I want to do. She went on to UBC, where she also got a lot of, really positive experiences. She has just completed a year ago an MSc in archaeology at the top of her class. She's currently applying to PhDs with her first publication coming out. So, we see a lot of students like that who really, they start out kind of lost, and we get a chance to kind of help engage them and really help them move on into university and really prepare them well. So I've seen a lot of students sort of go from being kind of, I don't know what I'm doing and I don't know how to do it, to really thinking this is amazing and moving on and being very, very successful. So I think that's one of the big things about Langara that I really enjoy, just having that opportunity to see students grow and change. And then the other thing I really like about Langara are my colleagues. So I have really great relationships with my other faculty colleagues, and then also with staff in departments like the bookstore and the print services and stuff. So I really miss seeing all of them as well. So those are I think probably the two big ones.
Thank you. I really like that example of hearing the student success stories. Rachel, let's skip over to you. Would you like to share what you like most about teaching at your institution?
I came to Western in large part because of two main things. One was actually the library. The Western Library Services is it is an incredible support for teaching and research, and it is phenomenal. It's having to change more recently because of potential. I think it's because of funding issues. But I'm being recorded, but I don't know. Don't quote me on that. But there have been some changes. But that was a big boom for me, a big reason why I wanted to go to Western. I think the other big thing about Western is that I was a school teacher. I am always trying to find ways of being in classrooms and being with children and being with teachers, and that's something that in my faculty is in the work that I do that is so important. And so there is a wonderful teacher education program that is very much based in communities.
Great. Peter, would you like to go next? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. As I mentioned, I've been here for 21 years, so I've witnessed a lot, or have a lot of institutional memory. So I've gone from teaching a course with only 4 students to now it's 50 students with a waiting list, and to get in. So the university has grown; it's become more institutionalized, which is rather sad. But we still have that small size feel. We've got less than 1,000 full-time students, so you get to walk with the students from the beginning. And even though I teach mostly senior courses now, I always insist on teaching at least one first-year course a year, just to kind of to meet the students and to watch them transition through the 4 years from fresh out of high school, green and all over the place, to seniors, undergraduate students that are organized and know what they want, and really at the top of their game. Some not so much, but we hope for later on. So that's kind of exciting, and also being a small university, like the president's just 2 floors up. The dean is just 1 floor down, and the maintenance people are over here, and the bookstore is just 100 feet from me, or a couple of 100 feet from me, and the next building. So you find this almost like a family, and we have like our Christmas celebrations, and everybody's there, and you really get to meet a lot of people from different faculties, different disciplines, and it's a lot of cross-pollination of ideas and stuff like that I've really enjoyed, and I have a great respect for my colleagues, and the smaller classes really help as well. So that's what I really enjoy about St. Mary's.
Thank you. And Andrew, what do you like most about teaching at your institution?
I love the international mix of students because we're all international. I love to be able to, it's the cliche, but it's true. You learn from your students constantly, and sorry, my dog has just gone off at one rock going across the street. So it's constantly being exposed to students from different countries. We've got an ever-changing demographic of students. I love that energy. I love seeing them come in their first year and be kind of wide-eyed and really not sure in many cases what is this Canadian educational experience about? What is it about living in Canada, and going through that whole adaptation and learning process and being part of it, and seeing them by the time they're in their second year and about to leave, and how much they've changed and grown, both mentally and physically in many cases. Some of them are so young when they arrive, typically 18, but nonetheless. So all of that is great, and similar to a couple of what you mentioned, we have small size classes, which does allow you to really get to know the students and become more familiar with them. So it's all really enjoyable for me.
Thank you. So the next question is, thinking back to March 2020, I assume that your institution did pivot to online classes only. And if you were teaching during that semester, how long did it take you as the instructor to make the change? Like, they gave you time, but how long did it actually take you to feel comfortable with pivoting? Peter, would you like to start?
Sure. Yes, we actually were given 3 days, which gave me a 3-day panic attack more than anything else. I'm not very computer savvy, so it was rather a steep learning curve. And the university chose to go on use D2L, a program I've learned to hate, but nonetheless, so I after my 3-day panic attack, I just sort of focused on, I got to have the classroom. So I focused on Bongo, learning how to teach online. 3 weeks later, I figured out the grade book, and now I'm working on quizzes. So I still email students some of the videos to watch, and I like to be able to do it on D2L, but that's in 2 weeks section. So to answer your question, it's gradually evolving. You know, as I learn, some of my colleagues picked up quite quickly, and they're doing all wonderful stuff for it. Others are doing less well, and insist on being in person classes, which creates some issues. So I think it's all over the map. And I was actually I was within 3 days, I was doing teaching in virtual classroom in D2L, but I certainly wasn't, and I would claim even now, not fully using the program, because I'm just not, so I use it as I need it. I learn that piece, and managing my anxiety is taking a new piece every couple of weeks. I learn something new. So long answer to a simple question. I'm still very much in process.
I was afraid it was a little bit of a loaded question when I was asking it. So thank you for rolling with that. Jennifer,
Okay.
how was your experience?
Yes, so we had also 3 days to switch to online, and at the time I was only teaching 2 classes, so it wasn't a huge. One of them was quite a small class, a second semester Latin, and the other one was a second year special topics class. So the students were a little bit different than a sort of more general class, and I was also dealing with a family member who was dying, and so at the time, I just kind of just said, okay, I'll just put up some notes for you. I didn't even bother to try and learn how to do all of the online stuff. So I think, like Peter, I'm still adjusting to this, but certainly I think, the fall semester went a lot better than the way that the March semester ended. There was a lot of anxiety from students too, so I didn't want to sort of necessarily replicate the exact experience that they would have had at the end of a normal semester. So I did a lot of sort of, okay, we're just going to do the smallest amount possible, and just understand that this is a really difficult situation. But now that we're back doing actual semesters, obviously things are having to be a bit more adjusted. We're using D2L as well, which it has its problems, but there's I don't think any of those systems are great. So I'm teaching now synchronously over Zoom 4 days a week, and then for my Latin class, and then my other class is totally asynchronous. So it's been quite a learning curve this year.
And Rachel, would you like to go next?
Yeah. I have been teaching online since, I think it was 1999, maybe, because we have a long history at Western of doing in-service teacher education online. Now our tools have definitely changed, and having lots of time to construct an online course is very different than having to all of a sudden have emergency kind of teaching. And so my focus when we had to move really quickly almost a year ago was really about how do I construct experiences here for the students in a way that will be the most reassuring to them as possible. So I needed them to understand that, even though I might have been nervous inside, I needed to present to them, don't worry, I have this, I've got you, and we can do this, and we're going to do this. And so I needed to kind of exude that confidence, I guess. And so I tried to design the experiences to just be, as I said, as reassuring, as comforting as possible for them, to just move them through the rest of their course. And then in terms of preparing for this year, I work with, I coordinate this program in the BEd, and so I also needed to really support those instructors also in a way where they could feel reassured and also understand that we were not going to try to replicate the teaching that we were used to, and we were not either prepared to construct these really fancy online courses, but that we could still create really I think, really rich pedagogical experiences for our students that would be its own thing. So I tried to work with instructors in a way where we could make this its own thing instead of trying to make it like something else. And every time I think, oh, you know, I'm not loving this, I think, okay, how does it need to be its own thing? And when I think of it that way, I think it just goes better.
That is really good advice. Andrew, I know your role was a bit different when I last spoke to you in March of 2020. So what was your perspective, or what was the feedback you were hearing from instructors?
Yeah, so my role as an acting associate director completely turned on its head. Well, all of our lives did, obviously. And all of my role really became about supporting and preparing instructors overnight, as everyone mentioned, 3 days to get online. So for quite a number of months, it was putting the finger in the dike to stop it exploding, as all the instructors were in, as you say, in semi-panic mode. What do I do? We're supposed to be on Zoom. How do I use Zoom? So setting up various teachers and admin staff to run workshops, organizing office hours on a daily basis, constantly fielding emails and face-to-face. Well, after 3 days, it was Zoom to Zoom meetings. So it was just a flood. We had about 105 instructors at the time, and so that was my major job. And the instructors were just as much as you mentioned. How do I use the technology? How do I get the basics working? What's a breakout room? Our system that we use with the students is Moodle. So there were substantial amounts of work around Moodle, how to set it up beyond being a basic message board, how to start setting up classes. We ran, starting in our summer semester in May, we started running asynchronous as well as synchronous classes to try to deal with the complications of having students around the world. Time zone issues, and also I should say internet and technology dropout issues, which continue to plague us. But an asynchronous class does allow for, you know, if your internet drops out at a certain time of the day, well, you can pick it up at the time of the day where the internet is more trustworthy where you are. So there's a lot of preparation around that, helping prepare them and give them ideas around engagement, how to work on engagement in the online setting, of course, huge challenge. This sense of immediacy, how do you create that and keep connection with the students? These were some of the big points which the instructors were really suffering a bit with, I'd say. And the idea of engagement and immediacy with the students towards them and their classmates in the community that we're trying to construct or maintain online, but equally a number of instructors, as I'm sure some of you felt, feeling that sort of cut off from the life's blood of the energy and the students. You're looking at a screen full of black spaces in many cases. And you know, so some of my job at times had also been giving little bits of pep talks and ideas around how to keep themselves up, and as well as keeping their students up. So yeah, it's very interesting year for all of us, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely some similarities working in the institution. Prior to the shift to online learning, what was your priority when choosing course materials? I'll start with Rachel, and then the follow-up would be, how has it changed in the online environment?
I think that maybe I'll address the question of how has it changed. So I will be very honest with this. In terms of our Bachelor of Education program, we had a great text that we used for years that we loved because it was Canadian from the ground up. Very often, at the undergraduate level anyway, we have texts that come from the United States, and then there may be an author or two from within Canada that come on and kind of, you know, judge the material so that it becomes Canadian material. But the text that we had was an actual ground up Canadian text, and we felt that was really important. And I did a review of the text. This was about 14 years ago. And I guess because of because of that review, I ended up being asked to come on as an author of the text because somebody was retiring. So I've now, I am working on the 7th edition. We've just finished the 7th edition of this text that we've created, and this is the 6th edition. We worked with Nelson, what I loved about working on this book and selecting it was that I was teaching the course as I was writing the course, as I was coordinating the course. I was getting feedback from the instructors with whom I was using. I was getting feedback from the students. And so I was constantly like taking notes about what I wanted to change for the next edition. And it just, you know, it was a text that was not an add-on, but rather was like embedded right within what we were doing. And also because the nature of the course, we're talking about language and literacy. And I think I just want to also mention that one of the reasons why it is so important to have this be a Canadian-based text is because you can't talk about language and literacy without talking about really settler, with settler colonialism and what has happened with English in this land, and also the demographics of students it's all so specific, and so that's one of the reasons why it really needed to be a Canadian text. The other thing was I liked to have a textbook for our undergraduate students, whereas with our graduate students often it's a collection of articles and that kind of thing. But I really like essential text for our undergraduate students because it creates like an intellectual home almost for them. It's something that can carry them through and that they can keep going back to. And that we can keep looping in and out of, and the tone is the same, the language is the same, and that I think that growing familiarity with that is really important for them, as so many things are really new to them. So that's all stayed the same, but one thing that has become all the more important since we're online for everything is the importance of actually having a print text. We hear this from the students. They don't want, they do read online. Sometimes they have to read online, but actually having a text that they can sit down with and that they can they can have a different kind of relationship to has been really, really important.
There's a lot of thoughts there. I'm thinking about how to apply it on my campus too. Peter, would you like to comment on how your textbook selection was before and how it's changed, if anything has changed? Oh, you're muted again.
Sorry about that. I didn't want any clocks going off and all that kind of stuff. I try to keep it quiet as possible. Anyway, sorry. I think originally, well, of course, like Rachel, is very much the Canadian content was certainly a key element, and if there was a Canadian textbook, that always was probably always the first choice. And this also, when I was choosing a text, these resources for students was actually secondary, because I could always create more of my own stuff, and I just kind of wanted to build on what was already there. So it wasn't such a big issue. Since the lockdown or COVID, it's suddenly become very important what kind of student resources are available. And what I've discovered is that the stereotype that, you know, young people are going to be computer savvy is not complete. There's a lot of young people who are not computer savvy, and to depend on them to be computer savvy is excluding them from the material. So I find myself now far more careful. Is this easy? Is this easy to access? Is it simple, straightforward? Because students also themselves are on a learning curve. While before I felt very comfortable of supplementing it myself, and, you know, taking a power presentation by the publisher, can I add local material to it and stuff like that, which before. Now it's very critical, and student resources, student quizzes, I want to make sure they can access that really quick and really easy. So that's certainly a difference now.
Thank you. Andrew, I know at at FIC/SFU, it's set up a little bit differently. So maybe you want to chat about how some of the year one textbooks were set up?
Sure, yes. Yeah, because the different ways the textbooks are set up are myriad between the different instructors for the year two SFU programs. They'll typically take a first year SFU text, which is the same it's being taught directly at SFU as it is SFU curriculum. The stage one program, as it's all an in-house program, our texts are set up in terms of whichever textbook is most suitable for that level, which can be a bit of a challenge sometimes given the background. So for example, I taught world issues, just to give an example of my course, and the world issues textbook we were using was a high school textbook, which was, I'm trying to remember the newest edition, is about 14 years old. Pearson hadn't brought out a new one, but it's not just level, but also language appropriate, keeping in mind that a number of our students are, if you give them a first year university textbook at a higher level, denser text, as they're learning the conventions and expectations around reading and taking notes and studying, it can be quite a challenge. So it's a bit of a mixture of content and looking at the overall depth of text. The other thing I'd mention with World Issues, for example, was that it focuses very heavily on Canadian issues. And while I know that, as a number of you mentioned, Canadian focus is important, nonetheless, if you're a student coming in at 18 and you're having to learn about Kyoto, okay, that's international, somewhat back, but many other Canadian related issues, it can be a little bit too much all at once. It's a little bit too much of a strong focus. The other issue that we had with our year one students is making the textbook very accessible. So our textbooks were all online for the last several years. So they were embedded into the course right from the start using a Texidium system. We're using Pearson. We have a contract with Pearson to be able to supply the texts and then embed them. The advantage of that, of course, is that the students from day one, they have access to textbooks. Our year one students, again, a little bit more, takes them a little bit longer to get themselves together, I guess, and in terms of, they're used to a little bit more hand holding coming straight out of high school. So purchasing textbooks, it can easily take a few weeks before they have textbooks. You fall behind in the curriculum. So having the online for that program, and it helped us a little bit with our transition in some senses with being remote this last year. But yeah, all online text that worked much more smoothly.
Thank you. And Jennifer, would you like to comment on that?
Sure. Yeah. So classics is it's a pretty old field. So it's in terms of choosing textbooks, unfortunately, things like Canadian content are quite difficult for me. So I have some different choices, and I tend to be looking for things that are sort of at the appropriate reading level. I like books that will sort of support students. I tend to emphasize what we do in the classroom more, but look for a basic textbook to give them a general outline of what we're doing, and just kind of they can go back to and refer to it and maybe clarify some things. And then And the other type of reading that I tend to incorporate more is primary sources. I like them to read the actual, in translation obviously, the words of our ancient authors so that they can get some sense of that and think about them and analyze them. So I like texts that incorporate those. And I have in the past made course books, custom course books with these primary sources. I've moved more to just using online PDFs that allow students to bring them in on their phone in class, or they can print them off, but it gives them some choice, and obviously it saves them some money, which takes me to my other point, is that I tend to think also about the cost. I feel like textbooks are going very, very high, and students have very, very little money. Like I have a textbook. When I was looking for a text for a particular class that I developed a number of years ago, I went to look at the basic textbooks that would normally be used in the field for that sort of general introductory level, and they had been acquired by Pearson, and I think the cost had doubled, if not tripled, after they were acquired, like within a space of a year. And they said, well, these are $200 textbooks. And I said, yeah. So we went with something totally different, because I can't ask students to be buying them, and I find that if we make them too expensive, they just don't, right? They're sharing them online, they're downloading them, because they can't afford it. And I mean, it's certainly a problem, especially in Vancouver, where students are already renting and at very, very high prices. So I tend to think about cost. And I also find that they're reading less. And so I think, too, I've been scaling back my reading expectations a bit over the last few years and trying to get them to engage with some depth, rather than saying, here's 100 pages to read this week, because then they just don't do it. Whereas, if I can limit it and then we can, work on analyzing it a bit, then they actually have some engagement. I can feel the lack of attention with the internet as well. And I think, sort of shorter little little bites is sometimes better than having a really long amount of material. With the move online, I didn't make a lot of changes. I mean, it was the textbooks that I've sort of chosen for the reasons there. I actually was thinking, though, the only thing that I asked for was online versions of the texts, because some of my students weren't in Vancouver, and so I wasn't sure that they would even be able to get the textbooks where they were. So I did want to make sure, and we were able to find online versions of the text. So I think that's sort of my biggest, has been my biggest change. But my textbooks tend to be sort of smaller and probably less, fewer bells and whistles. And obviously, too, I'm still thinking about cost effectiveness now more than ever, because students are losing their jobs, they're not able to work, and so they're going to make choices about what they can afford. And I think, textbooks tends to be the first place that they go to start cutting. So
yeah, thank you for adding that. I was going to depart from the set questions, because we did have some come through the Q&A and in the chat, but the one I wanted to circle back to in terms of technology was from Carrie. There seems to be a love-hate relationship between faculty members and learning management systems. What do you like about your LMS, and what do you dislike about your LMS? So Peter, would you like to start, since you brought it up? Oh, your mic is off again.
It's the wonders of old age. It's a great concept. I do find it oftentimes they're very expensive, or they may offer students things that they may not need. Some of the bells and whistles, I'm not sure are all that useful, or the students don't use them for whatever reason.
Oh, do you mean for the publishers' learning management systems?
Yes, right? I find that.
Okay.
Yeah, and we backed away from a couple, finding that they were not really student friendly, and even for faculty friendly. I need to be able to use them too and understand them, and I was having a little bit of a trouble. So I think it's really important that usability is really key. And they're paying a big price. And I share with the comments earlier about the cost has really skyrocketed for a lot of these stuff. And so I ask, is the cost worth what the students are getting by these innovations?
I guess that we can include that as well, like with the resources that are being offered, not just the ebooks from publishers, but their own, quizzes and assignments and things that are set up through there. I don't think we've touched on that yet, but Rachel, what has your experience been with those types of publisher resources?
This is definitely a timely question, especially given that I have told you that I've been a longtime author with Nelson, and as you know, Nelson is just sold to talk at. We are being recorded. I'm an educator. It is abhorrent to me, the idea that you can package education. You can't package education and make it a one-size-fits-all for everyone. I want the instructors who know their content, who know their context, who know their students, to be able to make pedagogical choices. That doesn't mean not having resources, but it means that there needs to be as much flexibility as possible for, I think, the instructor. And the idea of trying to manage learning is an efficiency model that is not necessarily pedagogical. So I would like us to always prioritize the pedagogy first, understanding that, of course, efficiencies can be really important and they can be necessary, but they can't be the first thing. So I don't like canned content in any way. I also have noted that much of the canned content is not actually created by the authors of a text. So if there's canned content that is supposed to accompany a text, it very often is created by someone other than the authors. And that also puts it one more step removed. So resources, pedagogical resources for instructors, absolutely yes. They can be really, really well done. They need to be done in partnership with, at the very least, the authors of the text, and they need to be super flexible.
Sorry, I'll clarify the question, and I'll ask maybe Jennifer or Andrew to comment that it was about the learning management systems like Moodle and D2L, and then we sort of also included the publisher resources there. So I'll read the question again. There seems to be a love-hate relationship between faculty members and learning management systems, and what do you like about your LMS and what do you dislike? Jennifer, would you like to comment on that?
Sure. Yeah, I'm glad you clarified that because I was starting to be a bit confused myself. So I can't comment on the publisher sort of bells and whistles because my textbooks never come with them, and I probably wouldn't use them for a lot of the reasons that Rachel was saying. But we are learning. We're using Brightspace D2L at Langara, and in general, I think it's pretty much. I don't think it's any worse than any of the other ones. I feel like sometimes it takes a long time to do things. There's a lot of extra little clicks and this kind of thing. And I mean, to be fair, I've never designed one, so I don't. I imagine some of it just is just not possible. But sometimes when I'm working through this and trying to, I never used to use the learning management system very much. I would use it to just kind of post things like, readings or links or that sort of thing. So I never really used it as much as I'm using it now, and I go through it, and when I'm doing things like quizzes and stuff, and everything is sort of 3 or 4 different clicks and trying to work through it and stuff, and I think, gosh, did they actually have like a faculty member who's trying to teach a class actually just sit there and try and do this? Because I have to say teaching online is taking me probably twice, if not 3 times as long as normal, and it's just a lot of it is just little things like it takes me like 3 or 4 different things to say circle an error in an online assignment that's been submitted versus just using a pen and just circling it and stuff. So with something like Latin, when I'm doing homework and marking homework, I normally mark their homework every week. And I've actually had to make some adjustments. Normally I would circle their errors, give it back to them, and they would fix them and give them back to me. And I I check again, and we go through this whole process all semester. And I just don't have the time to do that because everything takes a lot longer. So I feel like it's, there's some of the stuff is pretty intuitive, and some of it is not. So it's definitely got some really good features, and that I've really been enjoying. I'm trying to think of one specifically to sort of say. I mean, I am enjoying the sort of automated marking in some of the quizzing, which is very nice, and it does allow me to interact with the students in different ways, but it definitely takes a lot longer. So that's.
Thank you. So I know we have now 8 minutes left, and I wish I had asked for more of your time in the day when we were planning this session, but I wanted to get to one we sort of have circled around, and then I wanted to leave time for audience questions as well. One of the challenges with online courses is being able to connect with, or one of the advantages and also challenges is being able to connect with students all over the world. What feedback have you received from international students taking your courses, if it's applicable to you? Andrew, would you like to speak about that?
Well, that's a bit of a hard one for me at the moment, given that I'm not in the class. I'll have to try and pull together a little bit of secondhand feedback through the surveys from students and so forth. A lot of students have been very appreciative that they're able to continue studying, absolutely, being online now. Sorry, can you repeat the specific question? Because
it was one of the challenges or advantages with online courses is being able to connect with students all over the world. And what feedback have you received from international students taking your courses?
Okay, so the advantages and disadvantages are a lot of it is based upon connections and time zones. So clear disadvantage and a challenge is that there are some countries which have sporadic internet signals depending on the time of the day. There are some countries where, depending upon which provider you've purchased, the signal will vary. Kazakhstan comes to mind. Sometimes people have to have more than one internet provider to be able to get signals at different times of the day. Students doing exams, big issue. Internet dropouts, the students write up saying, I got dropped out, I couldn't hand it in, I couldn't get the bandwidth or to be able to drop it into the Moodle because it takes too much to open that kind of a program. They send it to an email, it goes into a junk mail, and an email is from a QQ address, the little string of letters and numbers that are unrecognizable instead of our FIC Gmail. Gmail is geo-blocked in China. All of our students in China can't access our Gmail. So all of these issues happen, and then there's a chasing up, whether it's directly teacher to student or whether it's then advising, chasing after it to help a student who had an exam dropped out there, trying to find out how legitimate it is, etc. So these kind of issues are constant, dropping out in classes and so forth. I'd say that's the biggest one that comes to mind. The advantage, sure, that they can have all their assignments uploaded, they can mark them online, they can have automated systems like Jennifer mentioned. The marking is a bit of a nightmare. I've done that myself before we went online. Yes, trying to figure out all the ways to circle and write your comments can be much slower, for sure.
And because I'm mindful of the time, and the one question I think that I really wanted to get to, I'm just going to skip to it now, apologies, is bookstores often struggle with communicating to faculty and to students. Do you have any suggestions on how bookstores can communicate more effectively with you as faculty? Rachel, would you like to go first?
I think that this is a great opportunity. I was really grateful this year to have met Rachel Sandison, and I was having some difficulties with some of my books, and she and I ended up connecting and having just a really good conversation. And I think what it really does is, like somebody put in the chat, it makes you realize that we are allies in this. And so I think to have that ally mindset, and then to actually be able to have conversations. So very often, as a faculty member, my interaction with the bookstore is one of, I complete a form at a certain point of the year, I submit a form with my orders, and then I get maybe like an automatic reply, and it's a very kind of transactional sort of form of communication where there isn't really a person-to-person sort of communication that happens. It's forms. And to have opportunities to have that person-to-person communication is just really, really helpful, I think.
Peter, do you have any suggestions? Because I know there's a lot of email that goes through.
And my mic's on this time. This is great.
Awesome.
I have a very good relationship with the bookstore, at least from my perspective. They may have a different one, so you may want to ask them. The only thing that I would add is there's a difference dealing with sessional instructors and those who are full-time faculty. And that in sessional instructors may not fully know all the ins and outs, and be careful not to make assumptions that you can make with full-time faculty and they know what to do with it. And sessional instructors, at least particularly the first year or two, need some hand-holding. What are some of the policies going through? And sometimes they don't talk to the full-time faculty. They make assumptions with the bookstore, which I sometimes issues can come up. That's the only thing I would add.
That's great. And Jennifer, would you like to add anything?
Well, I too, like Peter, I hope, have a good relationship with the bookstore. So I think that's really important, because then we can, I see some discussion in the chat as well about sort of students trying to play the bookstore and the professors off against each other. So, it can be really helpful to, get a heads up or, get a message from my, from our bookstore guy to say, your student is taking photographs of books in the aisles, because I'm just like, what are they doing? So it's useful. This is a real thing that happened. So I think it's really nice to have that relationship. As for more suggestions, I don't know. I mean, the thing with email is that, we get so many, is that they start to get lost. I get really overwhelmed, but I don't really know what else to suggest at this point. I mean, this is really nice, this sort of thing. So, yeah.
Thank you. And I wanted to leave it if anyone has any last minute questions, but I know we're almost at time, and I wish we had more time to chat, because it's been so informative to have your perspectives sharing with us, like the insider view that we don't usually get from the bookstore side. At our conference, we haven't been able to put together a panel like this before, so we really appreciate you participating. So I guess if that's it, we're at time. Thank you so much to our panelists who joined us today to share their experiences, their insights, and thank you to Jen, Andrew, Rachel, and Peter for taking the time today to participate on our panel. For all of our speakers this year, CSC is making a $500 donation to a charity chosen by the CSC Board of Directors. And the charity that was chosen is First Book Canada, that puts books in the hands of disadvantaged young readers. So that was a cause very close to our hearts. And once again, thank you, Jen, Andrew, Rachel, and Peter for joining us today. Our next session is going to be after a half an hour break at 1 o'clock Eastern Time, 2 p.m. Atlantic, 12 p.m. Central, 11 a.m. Mountain, and 10 a.m. Pacific. It's customer service delivery augmentation. We'll see everybody after the break. And I'm so sorry we ran out of time because I had more questions to ask. So.
Okay.
But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for asking us about it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you
very much,
everyone. Thanks.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Bye now.
Pause recording.
Good job, Melda.